Hi, and thanks for joining us. On today's show, we've got Ronnie Teja, who's a Canadian entrepreneur and the founder of Branzio Watches. He's built a number of businesses and is an expert on digital marketing and e-commerce. Here's my conversation with Ronnie. Ronnie, hello there. Thanks for joining us today, I guess from sunny Thailand, right?
Yes, sir. Thanks, JB. I appreciate you, bud.
Yeah, it's good to see you, and yeah, appreciate you as well. A little envious as we're in the midst of winter here in North America. What is the weather like in Thailand right now?
Quite warm and quite rainy. So it's a very tropical place. So usually an afternoon full of rain, and then of course sunny all day.
There you go. I mean, sounds pretty nice. I guess, you enjoy that. You've also been accustomed to the rains of Vancouver, right? How long did you spend in Vancouver?
Yeah, lived in Vancouver, immigrated in 2008. So fully as a fully grown adult when I was about 21, 22, and then moved to Vancouver. Uh, when you move as an adult immigrant, it's quite a bit harder when you move to a new country. So my first job in Canada was essentially picking blueberries. So I used to go and pick blueberries at farms. So that was my first gig, and from there taught myself online marketing and then got into running my own businesses.
Wow, that's transitions from blueberries, maybe even doing some of your first work on your BlackBerry, right, to the point where you're now
Yeah,
running e-commerce businesses, right? So when you say, I mean, e-commerce has exploded, and it's such a there's such a grand array of businesses that are now doing it. What specifically are you doing, or how are you empowering other companies?
yeah. I mean, look, core business is centered around watches. So Branzio Watches is the brand that I run. And we have a couple of other portfolio companies. And the way we usually go about this whole business is, um, look, the way the business started was quite simple. Coming from the background that I did, coming and family for living in somebody's basement, people are usually asking me, it's like, hey, what drove you? Are you passionate about watches, or what exactly drove you to this business? For me, it was a nest egg, so to say, essentially, which was focused around keeping my family safe at the end of the day. And from there on, we sort of grew up to the next level, which is when I went to Shenzhen and I went to Hong Kong to learn and research more about watches. It kind of turned out to be a lot more interesting. So that's when I sort of dove into the world of watches as well. So for me, primarily, business has been a means of earning income and everything else. I mean, I'd like to give you some tech talk and some very motivational things here, but for me, it was more driven by a necessity to be able to do something for myself.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, that's a great answer. Let's not kid ourselves. I mean, we're passionate about our business, but it's called work. We're here to earn a living at the same time. What have you found has been the most lucrative?
In terms of,
Well, in terms of business, as you build business, so where are the best areas to be? Where are the most lucrative places to be? For someone looking at earning that income.
yeah, oh, for sure. I mean, look, at the end of the day, if somebody is looking to start, I mean, there's a thing about time and place that people usually talk about, right? And for me, I believe that the time and place for me was 10 to 11 years ago, because Facebook CPMs were pretty cheap. Google ads were much cheaper. There was less competition. Not everybody was starting their own businesses. Amazon businesses were much easier to start. There was less compliance and all these other headaches that they have today. Today, if you were to start an online store, I think and also keep in mind also the social media that we have today was extremely different, because back then there was only Facebook, right? Along came WhatsApp, along came Instagram, along came TikTok, along came, Pinterest, along came Twitter. So now when you're building a business, you have to think about not just one channel, you have to think about, what 20 different channels essentially. And it's kind of like a customer journey at the same time, which is essentially that a customer touch point before they end up buying from your brand essentially has to touch your brand about 20 different times in order to complete a purchase from you.
20 different times. And those, as you say, these touch points, they're all the things you just described. They'll check through Instagram, they'll check through, I guess,
Yeah, they'll
Facebook
check through
before they get,
Facebook, they'll
yeah.
look at TikTok, they'll look at, then they'll look at your reviews online. Then they'll say, oh, is this person who they say they are, and are they legit? And then they'll ask a friend about it and be like, hey, do you want to come have a look with it? And if then after, like, the 6, 7 steps, they're probably then thinking about, should I pull the trigger? Then they'll again go through that same gamut of being reminded of who the brand is, where the brand is, what sort of, I guess, the exploratory phase that they're in. then they'll end up purchasing from you. And the purchase happens either on your website or it happens on Amazon. So you want to be sort of in front of the customer when they're ready to make that decision at the end of the day, and that happens through ads.
That's right. To get in front of the customer. So it's interesting you say that the turning point for you, 10, 11 years ago. Somebody listening now, if they're saying, okay, I would want to build a business over the next 10 years. What would be the right place to position themselves? What are things going to look like from now going forward?
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, everybody has a lot of things to say about AI, right? And everybody's like, look, how everything I can outsource everything to AI, I don't need to hire anything more. So it's funny that when I look at it from the grand scheme of things, AI essentially isn't going to do a job for you. It's still a machine learning model. You need to tell this particular model to do the things that you needed to do at the end of the day, be it writing contracts, be it whatever it is, right? I mean, you're a lawyer, you would know that, you can generate, a contract, simple employment contract using ChatGPT or whatever it is, right? But you need to train it to be able to read it in that sense. So maybe what you will see is the workforce is going to shrink to what it takes to make $1 million. You could probably be a single person running one company and running it by yourself with all these other tools that you have to be able to make $1 million, versus what it was in the 90s and the 80s was you needed a certain threshold, which was like, I believe in the late 90s it was you still needed 50 to 100 employees to hit a $1 million business.
So there's more torque. Leveraging technology gets more torque. AI is obviously a space that is developing, so one of those areas that presents opportunity. How much are you coming across either professionally or personally, like crypto and blockchain?
So that's an interesting question. Look, crypto, I don't know. I'm not as educated enough to talk about it, but what I think there is an opportunity for is like NFTs. So when I think about NFTs, an essential and integral part is you get to own a piece of the main company or a piece of the pie, right? So an example I can give you is watches, right? So when you buy a Rolex today, which is probably the world's most well-known brand for that, people will want to know if it's authentic, right? It's not something that's has a Dongguan movement or whatever else it is. They want to know what the history of this watch is, who the previous owners are, right? So for a thing like to guarantee the authenticity, to be a part of the piece, get a piece of the pie, Rolex and the NFT model fit really well, right? Because it gives it that sort of type of authenticity. And then there's also this gray market watch for dealers, right? Because people, like, it's a Rolex Submariner is about a $7,500 watch, which people are selling for about 18 to 20,000. Now that's mainly caused because Rolex wants to constrict the supply of all its watches. Now, if you were to look at it from a different perspective and say, hey, Rolex, we'll cut you in on 5% of whenever I resell this watch, and you transfer the ownership papers to the next person, then that NFT makes sense. So the brand makes the money, you make the money as a reseller, and then everybody's happy. It's happy days for everybody. So from that perspective, I think NFTs have in e-commerce, specifically speaking, in this case, have a very, they have a very good fit, but it depends on each industry.
So NFTs are here to stay. I think I hear you saying.
Yes, they will stick around, but it depends on who implements them best, right? I mean, people are putting in NFTs as very limited supply, like the bathing ape, right? So they're like, okay, look, we'll supply you with NFTs, and you buy these, and you get to own a piece of the company, etc., etc. So it's like a stock. They're giving it as a stock, which kind of doesn't make as much sense for me personally as, say, for something that guarantees authenticity. So when I talk about wines, whiskeys, cigars, etc., I think that from that perspective, it would make a lot more sense.
Interesting. More from a collectibles, or looking at the rarity and being able to track the transfer of an item.
Yeah, but the mentality is the same, right? I mean, NFTs, people want the rarity of the NFT, right, and the collectability of it. But now you apply it into a real world model where you're looking at, like, your watches, your 70-year-old Macallan, or 150-year-old Macallan, or 100-year-old Mount Gay rum. Same principle, but that product is physical, and you can feel it at the end of the day, and this is authentic up to 100 years.
That's right. And we know that's where it's going. So interesting to watch the space evolve. I have people on the show, obviously, predicting what things will look like. It's always just interesting to get anecdotally where people think business will be on a go forward. Where do you think you'll be personally? where, I mean, do you plan to stay in Thailand, or if we're having this conversation in 5 years, where are you living?
Probably back in Vancouver, I would say.
Mhm.
Right? I mean, I'm not here full time. It's sort of like a nice winter escape. But at the end of the day, you go to where the cluster is, and the cluster for me is in our industry is well, there's three clusters for e-commerce. Number one is of course Hong Kong because Shenzhen's right across the road, and number two is going to be Austin, Texas, where a lot of the e-com guys are moving out, and number three is going to be New York City. So those are the three places where by default I'll end up within the next 6 months.
And you do so much of your work remotely as well, right? So even as you cite these locations, why would you need to be in any of those locations if you're doing all of your work remotely?
Correct. I mean, it's the cluster that the type of caliber of people you want to surround yourself with at the end of the day, right? If you want to, I think you're a product of your company at the end of the day. You are as smart as the next best guy in the room. So in this case, is like if I can find like-minded people in those places, and I'm hoping, this is my personal thing, is I'm hoping some of the experience and the brilliance probably rubs off on me.
So what type of people do you like to, I think you just answered that question, but what type of people do you like to surround yourself with?
People who are much smarter than me at the end of the day, people who are more successful than me, people who are, where I walk, people who like to give, right? At the end of the day, it's not a take system. I think my mentality changed when I started giving more to people. So when I started giving more to people, that's the time that I said, okay, I don't want anything from somebody, and I just, you give freely, and then you leave it at that. I think those are the kind of people I enjoy hanging out with. Whereas, in some cases, you're sitting across for somebody with a coffee for a coffee, and then when the ask is coming, and then when that ask is coming or something else happens, and it kind of like just ruins the experience of you trying to meet somebody without any sort of in the box of them asking for something at the end of the day.
Yes, somebody without an agenda. It's so interesting you say that, Ronnie, because some of the most fascinating people I know as well are the ones that they just give willingly, and I think they'll be the first people to tell you that they feel as though they're rewarded 10 times over for all that gift giving. What is the best way to give, do you think?
Well, it depends. Experience shares are the best ones if you would, but not necessarily giving people advice. I think there's two things here. Giving people advice is quite a lot different than sharing your experience. Giving people advice is me telling you what to do at the end of the day. And if something ever went wrong, then I'm the guy you're going to blame at the end of the day. And advice doesn't necessarily work out from that perspective. Experiences to share is something that has no. I don't think so. There's any substitute for it, right? So at the end of the day, if you go in and say, hey, tell me about the time you did a LBO, like a leverage buyout. And then at the end of the day, if a person comes and says, hey, look, I went through an LBO for 4 or 5 companies. This is what I did. And then you take from it what you need to, absorb it like a sponge. And maybe you'll find like that one small thing that you focus in and hone in on. And then you can ask them about that experience. Or the best part is, hey, I was really interested in, the ratchet clauses in LBOs. Can you please tell me more where I can read up on it, or what sort of, where I can go down a rabbit hole reading about it? I mean, JP, you're a lawyer, you would know all about ratchet clauses and LBOs.
Absolutely, and I love the way you describe to just say, "Tell me about it." People love to share the experience as well, right? They're a little more reluctant to to give advice or to extend themselves, but certainly they like to share their experiences, and we can gain a lot. We can learn a lot from others' experiences, and those that are prepared to share them will oftentimes give us something something in addition in return, where they will talk about a lesson they've learned along the way, right? Something that they've learned
Correct.
through that experience, right? What are some of the
Yeah, it's a shortcut.
a shortcut, right? Or so you don't necessarily have to feel their pain, right? Or go through the same painful thing that they may have endured. Are there an example of a tough situation or a painful lesson you've learned along the way?
Well, there's a few. I think the first time would probably be like when my account got banned by one of our payment processors. So this was about 3 months into our business. I think they had about $60,000 or $70,000 of our cash lying with them, and I was freaking out. I was like, look, I only have 10K left in the bank account. What the hell? Where the hell am I going to get my next production from? So it turned out to be, in the long run, a good thing. Back then, the US dollar was at par with the Canadian dollar, if you remember those days. And then it ended up being like 1.3 or 1.4. So I did get paid back with 40% interest. Good deal. But at the time, you're freaking out. You're freaking out, and you're like, what is it that I can do, or what is it that's happening around me? Like, so you kind of like decide, okay, woe is me. Number one, I'm going to shut down my business, and that's it. Or number two, the other option that you have, which is you continue to persevere. So my lesson from that was perseverance. And it wasn't the first time that that lesson comes in an entrepreneur's life. It happens, 10 times a year, could happen once a year, could happen none of the times a year. But perseverance and consistency are two things, qualities that entrepreneurs need to have no matter what.
Absolutely right. That's the one thing that we hear consistently is the perseverance, the will to succeed. Right. It's not for everybody. A lot of people aren't actually capable of driving through. A lot of businesses fail because the entrepreneur doesn't drive through. A lot of people just aren't capable. But you see that the people that do succeed, they have persevered, and most of them have a painful lesson to share. That's certainly one that would have been a painful one for you to endure. Now, tell me about give me the positive. What are some of the good things you've seen and done that work and make sense to share with others?
Yeah. Number one would probably be freedom is your currency, right? If you decide to start a business, remember that you're the one at the end of the day who has the freedom to live and work and do anything anywhere. Some people are happy making $100,000. Some people are happy making $1 million. Some people are happy making $10 million a year. Whatever that facet is, contentment is different for different people, right? But freedom and the freedom to make your own choice, live where you want, work where you want, have a team wherever you want, I think speaks for is a different one. The second mistake that I made, which I think which people here can learn from, is, if you were to hire fast, right? Hire your first employee. I waited 6 months because, and I thought I could do it all by myself. And by the end of month number 3, I was pretty burnt out. So make a choice, make a decision to hire your first employee when you start your business and what they would be doing. I essentially would trust people a lot and not give them objectives and say, look, what am I measuring based on your performance? And that was, something that I would say to you that you could probably learn from. Another thing was putting like management systems in place, something called EOS, right? Entrepreneur Operating System. There's a book written by Gino Wickman called Get a Grip. Highly recommend people read it. And it talks about how to actually build a small business, from a small business to a medium scale business, and have a management team in place. When I put this into place, I think I stopped working 80 hours a week and I started working 40 hours a week. I wasn't always running around with my head cut off.
What are some of the principles from that then, as you say, to prevent yourself from running around? Obviously hiring well, but what are some of the principles?
Well, the thing is, when you start hiring, right, it's like, it basically goes through the hiring strategy and how you want to structure your organization. So, when you're hiring people, you have to look at like, got it, want it, have the capacity to take on more. These 3 things are important. The other one is, what are your mission, vision, and values? A lot of people, including myself, it takes a long time for us to come up with the mission, vision, and values there. And today, when I had a call earlier with my mentor, and we were talking about values and what are values for the organization, and he's like, this sounds pretty flowery. So now I have to go back and do my values again, which is fair. Which is like, so it's a good challenge for me to have it, like, because I put them very broad. It's like trustable, resourceful, human, or something else like that. And it's like, okay, well, they sound, what does it mean? Like, what does it mean for your employees? Like, what is it essentially? It's a very soft touch. You can't really go with that. You need something that a yardstick or a North Star that people use on a day in and day out basis.
I love it, Ronnie. So what are your mission, vision, and values?
Mission, I just told you the values. Trustable, resourceful, and human. The mission is to be the number one watch reseller and the producer and watch site that people come to buy quartz watches in the US, right? And that's it. And the vision, that's my vision. And the way we intend to accomplish this vision is we are giving our customers the best customer service that any person who's buying a watch will ever get. And I don't think so we live up to that value. I think we have a long way to go. Because if I need to have that, I need to be hiring people who are watch enthusiasts.
Mm-hmm. And you got to persevere, right? You got to drive through that, as we described before. So what is the best way to buy a watch? I mean,
The
through
best way
you
to buy.
obviously, but what are you looking for? What are you saying to
Well, it
people?
depends.
People,
Yeah, I mean,
the
look, I
watch
sell quartz
enthusiasts, what are
watches
they
at the end of the
saying?
day, right? Yeah, I sell quartz watches, man. Quartz watches are cheap and cheerful. They cost you less than $100. Watches, good watches can cost up to $1 million. They can cost you $2 million. I mean, for the right watch, a Patek, it can cost you, or the Patek Tiffany Blue, $6 million. So you have to think about what watch you want. I mean, if you're just getting started in the watch business, what my suggestion is always is get a quartz watch, see how it looks, see how it feels on your wrist, and then once you feel like, okay, hey, I'm interested in watches and the movements, because remember, this is the one true piece of jewelry men get to wear, right? Then you start buying watches for occasions, right? Graduations, bar mitzvahs, whatever it is. If you still like them, then you buy them when you close a business deal. When you close a big business deal, I know a lot of the folks that I know, they buy watches for a special occasion to remind them of when they closed a big business deal. So it just depends on the gamut of what you want. I mean, ideally, it's going to be like 10,000 people buy a quartz watch because it's cheap, right? Out of this 10,000, 1,000 people or 2,000 people will get into the automatic watch movements, which are about $500 to $1,500. And then from that, there's going to be 500 people who are going to get into the mechanical watch business, which is called masstige, right? So Rolex is a masstige brand. It's prestigious, but it's for the masses.
And those type of watches, if they're bought right and you know what you're doing, will hold their value, won't they?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you look at the watch market, I mean, we're Canadian, so we can talk about Kevin O'Leary. I mean, there's a nice video of him where he's talking, because he likes his watches, right? So, and he's talking about how watches, his watches particularly, have beat the S&P 500 and every other index possible. So if you were to buy a watch at retail, now the important thing that I want to say is at retail, you need to buy these watches at retail. And if you have them at retail, then you keep them with you for the rest of your life. I usually just buy watches secondhand or buy at retail. I will never overpay on a watch. It's just not in my bones.
Right, because it's not there and you know it. But how do you ensure that you're not overpaying for a watch?
Well, there's a few websites I use to do price comparison. There's a watch site called Watch Charts, which will tell you what it is. Ask a friend of yours who's a watch collector. They'll usually be able to tell you what the retail price is. For example, here's an interesting one. A Rolex Daytona costs you a steel version will cost you about $17,000 at retail. However, on the gray market, that same watch sells for about 35 to 40K, which is unheard of, right? So watch charts is something that I usually look at. There's Chrono 24, but Chrono 24 is full of like secondhand sellers as well. But yeah, watch charts is what I would usually be looking at as a peg to see, okay, which watch should I buy and what's the retail price of it. And never buy it. It's passion collecting. At the end of the day, remember this, it's passion collecting. Passion collecting it's not an investment. Like if it goes up, well and good. If it goes down, you know what? It happens. It's like buying a case of wine.
Yeah, it's, as you say, a passion, something that you enjoy. You get the benefit, the enjoyment of having it and wearing it. As you say, it's a piece of jewelry for men. No, I certainly like them, and I recall hearing John Mayer describe how he was spending a fortune on collecting watches, and his business manager.
John Mayer's got the Rolex. He's got the Rolex green and gold. That's the John Mayer Rolex. That's it. So there's a good example of a Daytona. That version of the Daytona last year in the market was going at 130,000 US. This year, that same model, you'll be hard pressed to find it. People will be hard pressed to sell it for 65. So see what happens. Like if the watch markets, they're in a free fall. So that's why I said buy retail.
So interesting to hear that say that. So Ronnie, love it. Obviously, you've got a wealth of knowledge through the businesses you've traveled, or through businesses that evolved through the years and your travels. If somebody is interested in learning more or wants to find out about some of the things you described here today, what's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, you can just find me on LinkedIn, Ronnie Teja, RONNIE, and my last name is Teja. Just reach out to me on LinkedIn. Happy to entertain anybody.
Happy to entertain as you continue to fulfill the mission, the vision, and the values, right?
Thanks, buddy.
Appreciate having you on here today, Ronnie. I'd like to leave these shows with one thing that somebody can take with them through the rest of the day, through the rest of the week after they've listened to the show. What's one thing that's really worked for you, something that's resonated with you, something you can pass along to the listeners?
Yeah. I mean, I've said it before. I'll say it again. I said, surround yourself with people who are always smarter than you. I think you're a product of the company you keep. I've stood by that since I was probably 10 years old. Sounds weird. I was an adult when I was a kid, but that's what I would always say.
Well, thank you for sharing your adult wisdom with us here today. Appreciate having you on. We'll see you next time on the Millionaire's Lawyer.
Thanks, bud.